Happy Friday, YouTube, and welcome back to AI News, Drama and Updates. As always, there's a lot to cover this week in the world of AI. Buckle up!
Alright, what you just saw there was a fun example of something I put together using a new technology that I just came across last night. But as you can see, it's very impressive, and believe it or not, it only requires one single image to do all of that. It has its own models and everything. But switching it up to the news, let's talk about this AI law case. So some of you may have heard about this unprecedented case, so to speak. And if you remember, we did talk about an instance of something similar to this a while back where a lawyer was trying to use AI to do a part of their job. They were really just being lazy about it, they didn't double check things, and they ended up submitting things into the case that weren't even relevant, so the judge was understandably very upset. The nutshell version of this story is rapper Prezekiel Pras Mitchell lost his case. They found out later that the lawyer used AI in the closing arguments. So it's somewhat akin to saying I hired a lawyer who was absolutely terrible at his job, this case should be thrown out. I hadn't yet heard of any other cases where defendants were throwing their lawyer under the bus for trying to use AI to defend them. But what's funny about this one is it's not like ChatGPT, it's not GPT-4 or anything that you've heard of, it's something called iLevel.ai. And I guess that company put out a press release in May of 2023 boasting about its use in the closing arguments of this particular case. Even if the case was lost, I guess they were just excited to have it used in a federal trial. Goes on to say Kenner was quoted in the press release as saying the tool is an absolute game changer for complex litigation. This is a look into the future for how cases will be conducted. And based on what we're seeing here, he wasn't wrong. And something leads me to think that had this case gone well, had they won the case, and he avoided the 20 years in prison otherwise, this would be a different story. But because he didn't win the case, we're going to kind of follow this and see what happens. It goes on to say here that it misattributed a Puff Daddy song to Mitchell's group, the Fugees, with the lyrics here, every single day, every time I pray, I'll be missing you. In fact, those lyrics are by Puff Daddy, according to the article, but I believe those are actually Sting, if I'm not mistaken. And I guess the tool also attributed Ghetto Superstar to his group rather than he himself when that was an actual single. So I don't know anything about iLevel.ai or the technology that it's based on, but given that this wasn't the greatest defense and it had a lot of messed up information, I am curious what API it might have been using or what large language model is kind of running on the back end. This is a tool that I hadn't even heard about before though, so maybe bad press is good press in a case like this. We'll have to see if they continue to build on it or if it goes defunct. You know, and as we have our eyes set on the future, I wanted to include this article here by Ars Technica. And this actually covered and talks a little bit about a lot of different presentations that went on at TED. Because as you can see by the headline here, experts are debating on whether or not AI is the new electricity. There's grifters in every direction. There's very pro-AI people that are doing it for their own very selfish reasons. And there's very anti-AI people that are doing it for their own very selfish reasons. But somewhere in the middle, at the people who are looking at both the pros and the cons of something like this and how to build a bigger future and a better future using tools like this, we're talking about concepts that aren't going to go away. Machine learning and algorithms and computing. These are things that are only going to stand to get better over the course of time. And unfortunately, when it comes to change, as much as we may not like change, raging against the dying of the light sometimes does absolutely nothing. Change is an inevitable thing. It's part of human nature, and it's part of our future. Now, as far as me, I try to stay optimistic about the things that I do look at, but I try to also stay objective. And hopefully those of you who've watched a few of my videos can agree with something like that. I admit that there are times where I get on my soapbox, but there's also times where it gets very frustrating when you see a huge amount of people that are very negative about things that aren't real or just simply don't exist, or are talking points for corporate interests. Taking a look at the TED Talks that they arranged here at TED AI, you can take a look at the different sessions, the different names that are in there, and while there's plenty of pro-AI people in there, there's also some people that are very not pro-AI. Or have been insanely critical of artificial intelligence or AGI or superintelligence concepts, things like that in the past. The article itself, of course, doesn't summarize all of the talks and all of the different subjects that are covered, but it does cover a top level and gives you an idea of what the vibe of the conference, I guess, was like. But the takeaway, at least for me in a situation like this, is a hopeful one. There are certainly concerns with AI, and we talk about those just about every week, it feels like. But leaving from this article and moving on, I'll leave you with the words of Chris Anderson, who said in the day's final moment, AI is going to be the infinite amplifier of human capacity in a million forms. Now, OpenAI, who was probably heavily discussed at that TED conference, they are debating on releasing yet another AI detector, but this time around the idea of DAL-E. And as you can imagine, because the last one didn't go so well, that's probably why they're having some pause on releasing something like this. For a tool like this to function perfectly, they would have to fully define AI-generated images, what it is and what it isn't. Does the Magic Eraser qualify? What about digital photo editing, cropping, things along those lines? Image manipulation is something that they could maybe look for, but that's the problem with this type of detector. It looks like Mira Murati, OpenAI's chief technology officer, said that the classifier is 99% effective. But I suppose for OpenAI and whatever limitations they've set up, that wasn't good enough. And when you think about what a detector like this would be used for in application, a false positive might mean someone gets expelled from school or loses a job. So it makes sense that OpenAI wants to be careful about something like this. And the article goes on to say, and like we talked about before, there's already companies exploring watermarking and putting things into the images that can be detected by things like this. And those tools could be put into our photo editing programs like Krita and Photoshop and things like that. But at the same time, and like we talked about, those are going to be easily manipulated. And it's going to be someone's main focus to try to get rid of watermarks at some point. You're always going to be fighting an uphill battle. So wherever you land on this side of the argument, whatever your thoughts are on AI art, how it gets detected and all that, just know that OpenAI has a detector. It is currently 99% effective, but I'm not quite sure exactly what it's looking for or how it defines AI art in a case like this. Like everything else, we'll keep an eye on it, and if and when it comes out, I'll talk about it here. Moving on to the concept of China and foreign affairs in general, I wanted to briefly talk about Jon Stewart. I don't know what Jon Stewart wanted to say about AI in China, but apparently Apple didn't want him to say it on their platform. Based on these brief articles and what I saw on Twitter, Jon Stewart basically quit when Apple told him to fall in line. Now, this is after two what I thought were very successful seasons on Apple TV. This isn't something I've subscribed to personally or ever really seen, but it does really make me wonder what it was that he was going to say about China and about artificial intelligence that would have really put him at odds with Apple's policies. While Apple has shown to have some pretty strange policies when it comes to internal and external use of AI, this does come as a little bit of a surprise move. Now, Apple as a company that is worldwide has a lot of big corporate connections in places like China, and the potential political fallout from Jon Stewart and what his opinions and his views are on something like Apple TV may have caused them some issues. I mean, at this point, I can really only speculate on why Apple decided to try to control what it was that he was going to say on their platform, but the article says that he wanted full creative control, so he decided to walk away instead. Now, Jon Stewart didn't get to really bring up or talk about China, so I'll talk about it a little bit. Baidu CEO in China, who is in control of the Ernie bot, or Ernie AI, I guess is now what they're calling it, their claim is now that it is not inferior to GPT-4 in any way now. So if this turns out to be true and Ernie AI is a multimodal model on the level of GPT-4, then that would mean that China has caught up to the United States, at least in terms of the LLM capabilities released to the public. It's been a little bit of a wild ride seeing it from afar because I haven't really ever had my hands on something like this. I remember originally it was an image generator like Stable Diffusion called Ernie Bot. And then at some point they started talking about it as if it was a multimodal LLM. And now at this juncture in time, in these presentations that are coming out, and I think with the investment of the Chinese Communist Party kind of really ramping this thing up, it's now being called Ernie 4.0, which is ironically its fourth generation as well now. And the video on the article, if you want to check it out, is you can see it's almost 3 hours long. It shows a lot of the different functions. And it is translated to English. The article details here how they've got something similar to the Google search generative experience that has recently come out for us here as well in the States. I'm actually very curious, not necessarily concerned, but curious what would happen in the United States if we were to see that China has more efficient or better AI than what we have access to. We here in the States, and you see it all over Twitter, there's a bunch of people that have essentially turned their entire personality into anti-AI people. They've essentially become fearmongers. And it's unfortunately kept a lot of people from investing or embracing in what could have been a bigger AI revolution for us. And while artificial intelligence itself isn't a weapon, it is something that is immensely powerful. It is something that will be weaponized, just like anything that's powerful. So my hope is that over the course of time, we start to see some of those fears go away. Because as it stands, it seems like, and the data that I saw show that the United States has better AI than anyone else, but we had the most people that were afraid of it, which is just bonkers to me. And it really just shows you how effective that propaganda is. Now, keep in mind, as we talk about China and we talk about how far they've come with AI, remember that they're doing that while hobbled. The United States has gone way out of their way to prevent them from having the semiconductors necessary to really do this type of technology. It's put sanctions on different materials, it's directly kept them from accessing GPUs that are better for AI than the other stuff. And this article looks like another step in that direction, where RTX 4090, which from what I've seen are the cards that have the most virtual memory, those cards are now export banned as well. So yeah, and we've talked about it here. Along with the RTX 4090, you can see a list of the different cards that are all on the no-go list to China. But this goes on to say that this isn't a China-specific ban. This actually looks to include Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Vietnam, but excludes Israel. And I guess the way that this is written, it's not like actually banned, it's just a lot of unnecessary red tape that's made to make it difficult or impossible to ever get what you're requesting. So you can request it, you just may not get it. So yeah, it looks like my takeaway here, I guess, is that it's kind of impressive to see that China has come as far as it has, despite the US trying as much as it can to get in its way. And if they were able to create something that is on the level of GPT-4 with their hands tied behind their back, you have to wonder what it would be like if they didn't. But as far as how Nvidia is talking about it, they don't seem to think it's going to affect their bottom line, and for all we know, it may not. I doubt there's going to be a surplus of 4090s anytime soon with how useful those things actually are. But let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about the world of entertainment and talk about Anthropic, and this is Claude, I guess, this time. So Universal Music Group has come after Anthropic this time, and I guess they're going to be suing them because you can get song lyrics using Anthropic as a tool. So lawyers are looking at the fact that Claude could generate music lyrics, and they're using that to prove that the music lyrics were scraped into the model, which we've covered this kind of like a million times. That's not illegal. Scraping is how the internet works. It's how search engines actually function. And beyond that, scraping and algorithms are how recommendation things function. It's probably how you found my video. Regardless, that doesn't stop lawyers from suing people about things. So this is yet another case that we'll keep an eye on, probably going to go nowhere, especially given that this is the same group that's working directly with Google. Now, I talked before about how Google and Universal Music Group were working together to come up with a way so that Universal Music Group can continue to exploit artists. This is going to be the way, apparently, that they're going to be able to do that. And this does segue very nicely from the last story. And it really just shows you what they care about is their bottom line. It always has been, always will be. But what it looks like they're working on, and this may be somewhat similar to how YouTube already is working with musicians to have like background music integrated and a profit sharing type of thing, or maybe a revenue sharing model. I'm guessing, based on what I'm seeing here, that the future is like, I've created this AI music video, I'm gonna upload it, and Universal Music Group's gonna take some of that money. I mean, based on what I'm seeing here, that seems to be the genius idea that they're kind of coming up with. And my early prediction, mark my words, is that the artist who originally sang the song, or the writer who originally wrote the song, is probably going to be one of the lowest paid people in that entire formula. Because that, based on what I've seen with the writer's strike, the acting guild, all of that other stuff, is how the entertainment industry seems to function. But unfortunately, unlike the writers or the actors with WGA or SAG-AFTRA, recording artists don't seem to have a union in that same way. You're not going to see a music strike anytime soon, for example. And because they're not working collectively as a group, in a lot of cases, there's groups of people taking advantage of them. The Recording Artists Industry of America, Universal Music Group. These are people that are capitalizing off of artists, not necessarily protecting them. But that's probably enough of that. I'll let you get back to enjoying your Friday. And I'll end today's video with another one of these things.
I want to thank each one of you who has taken the time to like, comment, and subscribe. This channel wouldn't be where it is today without you, and I really appreciate your support. Thank you as always for your time here today, and we'll see you next week for another episode of AI News, Drama, and Updates. Thanks for watching.